Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today, Maintaining Optimal Personal Wellbeing as an Allied Health Professional. My name is Jenny Pearson. I'm an Education Officer for the Primary Health Network, and I sit on Anawan land in Armidale in northern New South Wales. Before we go any further, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on today and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. Today, our presenter is Fiona Cosgrove. Fiona holds a master's degree in sports science and in counselling. She is a National Board certified health and wellness coach and has been undertaking PhD studies through Canterbury Christchurch University in the UK. Her training school, Wellness Coaching Australia, was the first international program to be approved under the stringent terms of the NBHWC and the Medical Board of Examiners. Now, if you have any questions, please put them in the question box and we will try and answer them at the end of the session. In GoToWebinar, you don't have the ability to turn on your camera. You do have the ability to speak, but I think if we type in questions might be the best today, as I know Fiona has a lot of material to get through. This is being recorded and it will be put up on our website within the next 24 hours, along with a PDF copy of Fiona's slides. There will be an evaluation that will pop up at the end. If you could fill it out, that would be great. Thanks, Fiona. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Jenny, and welcome everybody. I will try not to overload you with information today, but as always, when we get on a topic that we love, there's a lot to say about it. And after I put my presentation together, I actually did read the report on the challenges that all of you, or that you've mentioned, are very current for you. And that was helpful too. So to begin with, I'd really, as I say, Jenny said, put questions in the box and I'll answer them at the end. I'm happy to stay on after the hour in case people have to go, and it will be recorded. But also, if there's something burning, like what are you talking about, please put that in and Jenny will keep an eye on that and I'll try and address it as I go. But it was really great to see so many enroll in this session, which shows that you're shifting attention to yourselves and not just your clients. Where do your challenges lie? Again, I was interested to read what you put forward. Many of them overlapped, but some themes emerged. And my first thought was, this is all very familiar. You're not alone. The fact that this topic is so popular shows that we need help in this area of personal well-being to enable us to keep providing the care and support that we're expected to provide to others. So today, as much as I would like to be able to present a list of strategies which solve each and every one of those challenges, I'll be laying out instead 2 models that may help you make choices that will serve you well. Over the years, my focus has changed, not only in the way I work with clients, but in the degree and the nature of self-care of people working in the helping fields. I've really started to recognize this. The topic of personal well-being has gained a lot of attention in recent times. But first, let's not flick forward too much. We'll go back and let's have a look at what wellness actually is. Wellness or well-being. There are different definitions on the words. At its best, we're happy, fulfilled, relaxed, challenged, but feel a sense of control and all areas of our life are in balance. But wellness is as much about what goes on in the head as it is about physical health, because they're inextricably linked. And there's many dimensions of wellness. You will read of physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, interpersonal, social, environmental, even financial, all appear in the literature. But wellness is about integration and living fully. As you'll hear later, being able to identify what you want to be different is a necessary part of change. Which area needs the most attention and where can you start to make change? Now, I don't like starting with an I guess we speak about this such a lot, about the effects of the pandemic, but we do live in unusual times. And the reality is, what are you seeing? What are we seeing? As health professionals, we're often in this role because of our desire to help. But what's the risk there? That we find it difficult to help. Often clients present with issues that we can relate to, and we have to stop ourselves from over-relating. And is there a way of doing that? There is, and I'll talk about it later. But what's funny, light amusement, is that health professionals, as health professionals, we think we should have everything working perfectly in all areas of our health and wellness. After all, we have all the knowledge that we need, so we see this. I'm sure a few of you are smiling. Let's just get there faster and be the best we can in this area. So back to the current climate. A lot of your responses, and we know that people are reporting a feeling of overwhelm, maybe frustration and not feeling on top of things. The things you mentioned, the multiple responsibilities, the lack of time, the compassion fatigue, etc. All of these combine to create this feeling. And then we have the more serious condition of burnout, which was also mentioned several times. So let's go straight to that burnout condition and look at some of the contributing factors. What does contribute to it? Unrealistic expectations. Okay, so given the cartoon, that was a really good example of that. High response, these are just a few of the things that have been really brought up in the research. So the idea of having high responsibility but low control or ability to help. A lack of recognition or monotonous work. The values, your values don't align with your actions, your behaviors, or the values in your organization. Excessive workload, little support. And maybe the inability to say no. That was interesting how many times that was brought up actually in your responses. And that can then lead into other areas of your life and have a really big flow-on effect. But also be aware that's a behavior and it can be changed. So really hold that thought. I would like you, as we go through today, to really listen out for things that speak to you and try to, at the end of the session, highlight in or really focus in on one change that you can make. I'll refer to this again later, but listen to it from a personal perspective. So quick checklist. Now, if you've got one or two or three, you're probably fine here, but I'm not going to read them all out. Have a look down this list. This is how we know we're heading for burnout. And burnout has actually been recognized as a serious medical condition by the World Health Organization. Now, just because you've got two or three doesn't necessarily mean you're at that stage, but what we want to do is identify when we're heading that way and also where the stresses, which is where this comes from too, are coming from. So there's a difference. There's a difference between stress and burnout. Stress is usually short-term. It can come and it can go. And obviously the consequence of stress of any kind can be quite severe and spill over into other areas of our lives. But you might just be having one of those days. Now, there are strategies to deal with stress, but it's also really important to realize when it's getting so strong or constant that we may need the support of a mental health professional. I'm not for a minute saying that that doesn't happen at times, but burnout builds up over a longer period of time. As health and wellness coaches, we see stress now as being one of the biggest obstacles to good health habits. So talking about personal self-care, which is really where we get to when we talk about personal well-being, it's how we care for ourselves to give ourselves optimal personal well-being. And we need to consider both areas. So we need to look at change in both physical and mental habits, which may be needed. So let's talk about this for a minute. Let's talk about physical. And many of you will really be working in this realm. You're trying to help your clients create new habits. Are your health habits working well? One of the things I've discovered time and time again is that people try to make big changes. It's all or nothing thinking that pops up time and time again, usually on the 1st of January. But they think, I need to start exercising, so I should be exercising every day. I should be doing this. I should be eating absolutely healthily and never having anything that's unhealthy. Whereas the reality is the best way to create change, and this is echoed in a model I'll bring up later, is by making tiny changes. Some of you may be familiar with the science of habits, of which there's several really good books written, but there's one recently I picked up again called Tiny Habits by Brian Fogg. And you know how sometimes you just pick that up and go, that really speaks to me now. And he did a lot of research in the area, and he found that if you just picked one small thing and did it consistently for a period of time, it led to further changes. There's lots of reasons for this. A, it's not difficult, and B, you get a feeling of success. So I sort of digress on this to say that is a really good thing. So think to yourself now, I'd like you all to just take a moment and think back to health habits. If we can get back to that slide and stay there. Think of one area. Actually, it could be mental habits too. We're going to talk about mental well-being. Something that you do habitually that you'd like to make a change, and make a note of one tiny tweak in your behavior or your routine that you could make. It may not make a huge difference, but what would be one small thing? It's worth doing that as an exercise. I've tried it myself. And then secondly, the big area, which I think is probably one of the most important ones right now. Look, we know as allied health professionals that changes or improvements in diet, exercise, sleep, all of these things create the foundation for good wellness, but there's more to it. And again, this is being seen more and more in today's climate. We need to get our head straight. And I don't just mean our mindset, which is used all the time. We're seeing people present with issues around mental well-being more than ever before, as I've said. So I promised you two models, and I'm going to start with a very well-known one in the field of positive psychology. Some of you may be familiar with Dr. Martin Seligman's work here. It is revolutionary. It's been around since the turn of the century. He keeps refining it, and we teach it in our training all the time and use it on a personal level too. What it does, the model of PERMA, which we're going to go through, creates a framework that says if you've got these 5 areas under control or working well, it will lead to better well-being, mental well-being. It's like a checklist. And now and again, we can recognize that there's a bit of a deficiency. So let's just look briefly at each, and then I'll go into them in a little bit more depth. So positive emotions. In other words, if you laugh more in the day, you'll feel happier. That's a simple version of it. Engagement. You truly love what you do. Now, in a big sense, it could be engagement with your world, with your life, with your career, but it could also be engagement in activities you do outside of work. And if you haven't heard of flow activities, it's something that we all need to know and practice more of. It's when you do something when you're not aware of time passing, you have a sense of challenge, but you're not over-challenged, you're not bored. And when you finish, you feel like, oh, I'd love to do that again. Often it's creative hobbies. Sometimes our work, and we can hit the sweet spot too, but in today's busy world, often those things have been neglected. And I spend such a lot of time with clients talking about what's a flow activity for them. The next one, relationships. You enjoy good, healthy, intimate relationships. Meaning, you understand why you do what you do and how you fit into the world. And achievement. So you get a sense of achievement on regular occasions, no matter how small. So again, I'm going to go into each one of these again a little bit more depth. This is from his book Flourish, which is a really, really good read, particularly, as always, the first 2 chapters and the final one. Positive emotions. Have you heard of a positivity ratio? When we teach this, we say you actually need around 3 positive emotions to every negative emotion you feel in the day. And I encourage people to think about why that's so. And to give you the quick answer, it is that negative emotions like shame, sadness, jealousy, anger stick like Velcro, whereas positive emotions like happiness, joy, pride, humor tend to be very fleeting. That's a simple reason. So ask yourself, and if this is speaking to you, how can you increase them? Ask what drains them. What makes you happy, or what makes you smile, more to the point? How do you start the day? How do you end the day? And I have to say on those last 2 questions, often we start the day, not always, but watching the news. And what does that do? It brings us down. So we start the day feeling worried and negative. And how do we end the day? Those of you that have time to create a to-do list, often you look at it and go, oh my God, I didn't get half of that done. We try not to make suggestions, but my strategy for that is at the end of the day, I create a what I've done list, not a to-do list. So I write down everything that I've actually managed to achieve in the day. And we know there's other variations of this, such as what went well today, or even the deeper, more psychological version of gratitude. What do I have to be grateful for? So there are ways of increasing your positive emotions. Engagement. We've talked about how sort of disillusionment can really affect the enjoyment of our work, and we become disengaged. People with depression are disengaged. So to ask yourself, if you're feeling that way, is there a way to re-engage? And one of the really big parts of particularly strengths-based coaching is to get clients or get us to use our strengths. Find out what we do well, find out what we enjoy, because we enjoy work, we enjoy doing things when we're using the things that we're innately good at. There's strength surveys online you can take if you're not sure. So it might be, for example, a lot of coaches come to coach training because they have a strong sense of either social intelligence or curiosity. And of course, that work feeds into that sense, and it actually makes them really enjoy and be engaged in their work. Remind yourself of what good you're doing, which you are. Learn to coach, which I'll come back to. And as I say, flow activities. Even if you have a bad day at work, if you can do something that creates flow for you, it will help you. So, positive relationships. This is the R, by the way, not the P. Do you take time for this? Do we have time for them? We don't need a lot of relationships. We don't need 500 friends on Facebook. We only need a few. If you have a few more, that's great. But ask yourself, which of your relationships provide the greatest joy? Sometimes you'll find that the people you spend time with are ones that actually take that joy away from you. It's amazing how just reflecting on that can make you understand that you don't need to be with that person right now or on a regular basis, and yet you need to see someone else more regularly. Make it happen. Small changes can make a big difference. M for meaning. Now we get into a heavier area. If I mention a book, by the way, as I go, I will add a slide into the notes with references to those books. So meaning, I love this area. Happiness and meaning, they're not the same. You can actually have a strong sense of meaning without being happy. It's great if you have both. There's an interesting fact there, and parents in the room will relate to it, that being parents is not necessarily, let's just say parenting our children is not necessarily the time we report the greatest happiness, but we do report the greatest sense of meaning from it. So it's good if we can have both. Another big thing is our need to belong, our sense of affiliation. Belonging to groups, again, think about, where do you feel you belong? Can you create more of that? Are you giving enough time to that? We all, as human beings, need that sense. Social connection, common humanity, all these big things on all that with belonging, and as I say, connection. Your purpose. What is the value in your role? Why are you doing what you're doing? Are you enjoying what you're doing? Two of the other ones are a little bit more how we tell our story. So the storytelling, people who have meaning tend to turn bad things into good things. So if we keep telling the story of even our day in a negative way, it will become our reality. Turn it around, become the superhero in your own life. Talk about the things that you did well. Talk about what went well today. The idea of reframing is big in our coaching work. And the final one, very big, transcendence, really very simply, spend time in nature. The positive emotion of awe comes with transcendence and time in nature. I don't think I need to explain to you the power of that. But again, if we're in offices, we're looking at a computer, we don't always get that. The book that I love on this topic is called The Power of Meaning by Emily Esfahani Smith. It had a big impact on me. And finally, achievements. Kick small goals. So this idea of tiny habits, start tiny habits, get some runs on the board. They don't have to be big, small goals, and celebrate your achievements. There's a lot written about that, how we kind of do things and we go, again, positive emotions. Oh, great, I did that. That was awesome. Get down and give yourself a great big kind of celebration. It continues the joy, and it doesn't have to be big achievements. I used to buy myself a bunch of flowers at a difficult time in my life when I was running a very big business on my own, and I'd walk down into Martin Place, anyone who knows it, and buy myself a bunch of flowers from a flower seller. And he'd say, "Why do you do this?" And I said, "Because I got through the week." And it became a ritual. And there's another thing we can talk about, is rituals, but celebrate your achievements. The other thing too with achievement, it's very tied in with goal setting, which we love as health professionals because we like to move people forward. We also, we sort of say to people, be aware, don't get too caught up in the end result, because there's a lot of research and evidence there to show, this is the quote, remember, from the moment we've obtained something we desire, it is no longer desirable. So just hold that thought. I think perhaps it's better to be on the journey to a better place than at the end. And that is, again, one of the underpinnings of the work we do with clients. So that's the first model of PERMA, which, again, I think it's extremely powerful, even though it's those sort of 5 areas. I'm going to bring up 3 areas here because this is the field of professional self-care. And over the last 4 years in my research, I kept finding a lot written on professional self-care and professional development, and not a lot on personal self-care and personal development. But these 3 things came up as being, this is what coaches, it was around coaches, but it's no different from health professionals. It's what they needed in terms of professional development. And I'm sure you're all involved to a certain extent in some structured activity that fills these needs: reflection, peer coaching, supervision. So let's look at them. Having time to reflect on what went on in a session is really valuable. It's often missed because of time constraints. Try and make time for that, to just stop and think, what was that about? How did I feel? How did it end? What could I have done differently, perhaps? Peer coaching is a big thing. It's a process where support's provided by an equal. So you're actually on an equal basis, and it's usually you swap. So it's not just one person having balance of power. So you coach each other. It could be once a month, it could be once a week. And supervision is, mentoring, of course, is something different, and there's a place for that too. But supervision, note that supervision should be a safe space. It should be a safe space, and it should have a restorative function, not have any sense of evaluation. So supervision in my field doesn't really exist yet, and we're really working on it because we feel that we need to debrief, and I'm sure a lot of you feel the same. It's often missing in many helping professions. So now we move on, doing a little bit better because I haven't answered any questions. And Jenny, if there are any now that need answering at the moment, please, that would be a good time. I'll presume not.
No, nothing at the moment.
Good. Okay, I've got everyone stunned into submission. All right, the next model is going to be obviously very close to my heart, and I'm not here to say be a coach, but the value in this way of working is huge. I'm going to talk about it because it's a way of working that can support both our clients' change journey and also our own well-being. So I learned about health and wellness coaching many years ago. And the minute the light bulb went on, I was in sports science, I was helping people with their physical exercise. I began a journey to spread the word, traveling around Australia, telling all the people in sports science and fitness that have been doing it all wrong, and perhaps they could do it this way and get a better result. That didn't go down that well. But I began to have a better way of explaining, and then started training people in it. I know that occupational therapists, I will mention that because I know there's some on the call who'll be listening to this. I was really surprised and delighted to learn that there is a lot of coaching principles in their training, which is fantastic. They are principles, and it is a line of questioning, and it can help support, as I say, our own journey. So when I talk about it now, it's not just do this in your work, it's actually about you and your personal well-being. I felt so strongly about this, and I look back now and smile because I was still pretty new in that field with nothing but a master's degree in counselling, knowing very little about coaching. I wrote a book. I wrote a book called Coach Yourself to Wellness, which is right on topic for today, which is say, hey, we can do this for ourselves. And it's still around, and it was 10 years ago. So with coaching, the main thing here is that asking the right questions can be more powerful in creating change than providing the answers. Now, this is a shift for many people who work as allied health professionals because we've been trained to provide the answers. And there will probably be a few of you who have that question today. You can't just ask the questions. Surely they want information. And I could really go into a lot of detail in how we can do the two together and how we still leave the client feeling empowered. If I were coaching you as individuals around your own personal well-being today, I wouldn't be providing the answers to all the challenges you've listed. I'd be asking you questions and listening to your own ideas about how you can change things. So I believe that this model, it can create solutions, or at least this wonderful idea of the possibility of change. Because possibilities are something that actually is often shut down because of our belief system, because of the way we've thought for so long in a certain way is that, no, I can't do that. It won't change. Things won't change. Whereas you start asking questions that get people envisaging things, which I'll come to next, and suddenly it opens the door to the possibility that things may change. So I wonder how many of you put those two things down when you ask the question, thinking, well, you know, an hour webinar is not really going to change this. And it's true, you can't just suddenly wave a magic wand, but to open your mind to just maybe there's a different approach and a different way of living my life or living my work or making decisions on a daily basis. Just maybe things could change. So I'm going to talk through this model. Again, I could spend probably 3 days talking through this model, but I'll try and keep it brief because there may be some questions on it. But in a nutshell, it works like this. So the first thing, and it works for any change, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter whether you want to learn to say no, or you want to be able to juggle roles, or you want to be able, whatever it happens to be. The first thing that we encourage our clients and ourselves, what we need to do is to create a vision. Okay, and I'll explain what that means. And this is just the structure. So the summary is we create a vision, we discover our whys. Some of you will be familiar with Simon Sinek's work about first find why or find your why. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail. We then identify the things that are stopping us. Yeah, so let's just say one of you or some of you want better work-life balance. Okay, so we'll use that as an example as we go through that. So well, what's stopping you? So you need to do this reflective work to actually analyze and identify what's going on. The next step is to create strategies. I often call it find broad areas for change. So in some cases, it might be a sleeping routine. In some cases, it might be an exercise program. In some cases, it might be more around the relationship you have with people that prevents you from saying no. But we start looking at broad areas for change and some strategies. So one strategy might be, I need to improve my sleeping habits. And then we devise a plan. So there's nothing too scientific about that, but this is a model for behavior change, and it can work. It can work better than anybody telling you what you should do. So in the days of being sports science and owning health clubs, we just jumped straight into the how. You want to get fitter, you want to be better, you want to have health, on you get the treadmill, you know, whatever metaphorically. We never stopped and had this conversation, which is why I was so excited when I realized, hang on, there's some work to do beforehand. I've put this in there because I think it's something that needs to happen all the time. I think it's something that is sitting in the atmosphere of today's webinar, and it's something that's not happening too well. Here we are, I'm talking to, I don't know how many people, I can't even see you. Hopefully we're feeling connected a little bit, but I really miss that face-to-face and being in the room. Staying connected in whatever way you can is a huge part of success and successful change, let's say. So, creating a vision. If we were going to ask a client this, or I'm going to ask you now, on those challenges that you have, can you describe what you would like to be different in your personal well-being? What changes do you want? So we've said all the things that aren't working, but can you, in one phrase, try and describe what you'd like more of? Now, in coaching or using the coaching approach, let's say, this, you can use this in your work. The language is very important. So if someone says they're struggling with balancing work and personal life, the phrase would be, I would like a better balance between my work and personal life. If I had time and I was coaching that person, I'd say, what would that look like? So can you see we're going more into the detail? What do you mean by that? I can't possibly know. You know, what's going on now is another question. Describe the reality. And by having that conversation with people, you're learning more about where the change can take place. So I hope you're asking yourselves that now. Anyone with a challenge right now, what would it look like if it was different? Can you sum it up in one sentence? I'd love you to put it in the chat box, which of course I can't see, but actually by committing it to words and to writing and to typing is just an interesting, again, reflective exercise. So in one phrase, try and describe what you like more of. For some people, creating the vision could be writing a paragraph of the changes they want. And that's appropriate if you've got a lot of time with that person and there are a lot of areas, but it could be just around one area. So depending on your occupation, it could be that somebody would like to be pain-free. And I'm not going to try and step into your role, but the vision could be to be able to manage pain better. So can you see that's where you start? What would that be like? How would that feel? Talk about it. And then we move on. Because this is the biggest question, and a lot of our trainee coaches miss it. Oh, right, you want that? Fantastic. But the next question is, why? Why is it important to you or to me? And I'm asking you that now. Why is it important to you that you create whatever change that was that came to mind? Hopefully something did come to mind. The other questions, what's underlying this, is what are your deepest values behind the urge to change? So we actually say, look, use any question you like, but what you're trying to find out is what's the really deep level motivation to make a change. So if you want better work-life balance, it's not enough to say it. It needs to be, why is that important to you? Now, one person might answer, because I would actually like to have a better relationship with my family. It could be someone saying, I have no time to look after my physical health, and health is a really important value to me. So we dig deep into values that sometimes are shared. Some people say, I would like to be a better role model for my kids. It's a very common one. Doesn't mean it's not important. So what are your deepest values? What's the intrinsic motivation behind the change you want? Unless we have that conversation with people, they don't succeed. It's all just a statement. But why you want it is the thing that will drive them. Because what we're doing, what we're asking ourselves or with our clients, is we're asking them to prioritize what we value in life. And I'm sure some of you will agree with me that half of these problems come from the fact that we're not prioritizing what we value in life. Forgive me if I get a little passionate on this, but I think it's so true. And I've seen it so many times. The next question is, what's getting in the way? Like, if there was nothing getting in the way, you'd be doing it. So of course you'd like better work-life balance, for example. And it's easy to say, well, I'd like it because I'd like to spend more time with my family and I'd like to spend more time with my health. But there's a reason why you're not doing it. And we need a conversation around that. We need to answer that ourselves. And obstacles or barriers, whatever you want to call them, come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. We can categorize them, you don't need to. Situational could be what's going on. You need the money. You have to do 3 jobs. There's no one else to look after the kids. Behaviors could be habits you've fallen into. It could be, oh, well, I actually keep saying yes. Or I go to the pub on the way home, or whatever it happens to be for whatever the person is we're talking about. But it's interesting how just to stop and say, well, what's stopping me from getting this? Cognitive is the things we tell ourselves. Sometimes it's really deep beliefs. There's a lot of really faulty beliefs, and they're very common. I'm not worthy. I don't deserve it. I'm not loved. I'm not, all sorts of things. I'll fail. Or it could just be, oh dear, that's too hard. Okay, or that I'm not that kind of person. And emotional often comes out of the things we tell ourselves, or not, but recognizing the feeling. And a lot of it's fear of change, fear of not being good enough. So even though we're delving into psychology, this is psychology that we should all be using in conversations with ourselves all the time. And then the next question is, once you've identified them, we come up with strategies to overcome them. So it could be exhaustion. And remember I said earlier, someone's exhausted. So what can you change to get more energy? Now, it could be any one of a number of things. Often it's sleep. We find a lot of things around sleep and personal organization. But let's just say it was sleeping. So the broad areas for change is going to be around sleeping habits. So what are some strategies? Really strategically, it could be leaving the iPad in the living room before you go to bed. It could be setting a reminder to go to bed at a certain time. It could be creating a better sleeping environment. And then you start breaking them down in a minute into really clear action steps. But what we're doing is saying, if there are some strategies there, are these possibilities? So we don't push people and try and say, of course, it's easy, off you go. We say, okay, So that's possible that you could change that. Very often we have clients, and I better have a few on this call, who are perfectionists. We want to do it perfectly, or we don't want to do it at all. And they're the hardest people to work with. And there's a really easy way actually of getting around this. If you are a perfectionist or working with one, think of actions or changes as experiments. So instead of saying, okay, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do it perfectly, it's, as a coach, I would say, I wonder whether as an experiment, you might try whatever it is they've suggested. See how it feels. If it doesn't work, you can try something else. Can you see the difference there? We're not setting someone up for failure, which is what they're fearful of. So again, think about that for yourselves. Reflect on that. These are possibilities. It's opening our minds and our neural pathways to the possibility that change actually can happen. And then we create an action plan. Now, we're very good at creating action plans, aren't we? I used to love setting goals for clients. And even now when we train people, they go straight to the goals. And we often walk around and hear the conversation that I've been describing. And I can hear that, that sounds to me like you're talking about how. Have you actually talked about what and why someone wants it? Yes, we need to have some, action plan coaching is, again, it turns intentions into reality. We need to have a plan. I didn't call it on goal setting on purpose. We've identified the broad areas for change. We've accepted that small steps are better because we want to get runs on the board. We want to succeed. We want that feeling of success because it will give us more confidence to move forward. Did you know what the biggest obstacle is that people report when we say what's getting in the way? They don't believe they can. Confidence. And as coaches, often with our clients and ourselves, we're working in the area of building confidence, because until somebody believes they can make a change, they can't. You know the saying, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're probably right. Henry Ford, I think it was. So we're actually helping people think, well, just maybe I could. And if you get some runs on the board, your confidence goes up. We actually have a model where we create, what would you be doing in 3 months' time? So you've created this fabulous vision statement. I'd like to be more relaxed in life. I'd like to have more energy. So that is another way of saying why, so that I can have a better relationship with my family and enjoy more, better health. So in 3 months' time, what could you see yourself doing? And notice the language that would let you know you're on the way to this. So we talk about behavioral goals. So in 3 months' time, I will be leaving my iPad in the living room when I go to bed. I know that's very simple, but it actually can create a big difference. But it's worded in that way, and it's worded in that way for a reason. We don't want the 3-month goals to be outcomes. We want them to be new behaviors that you will continue to do. So not one-offs, they're new ways of living. And then because it's, say, 12 weeks away, people don't get overwhelmed by, oh my God, how am I going to do that? We say, well, what could you do next week to begin that process? So we try and tie a weekly goal, or rather next week's goal or action, to that 3-monthly goal. So hopefully that makes sense to you. It's very simplistic, but it's very effective, and it's often what people struggle with the most. Now, you might have 3 or 4 goals around different areas for change, but hopefully you get the idea of creating a future continuous behavior so that in 3 months' time, they'll be living a certain way, and next week they just start by making a call to the gym. Or another thing we do, and I think that you would accept this, is we encourage people to work collaboratively. Help can come from many different areas. And unfortunately, in our world, people tend to be protective about their space. As a health and wellness coach, I have many times referred people to an exercise physiologist or a personal trainer. I could have done that on my own. I choose not to. I don't want to do that. That's not how I'm working. It might be a yoga class. It might be a doctor. It might be a physiotherapist. But referring on, I think, and working together is a really, really good thing. So it's just as an aside. So we're getting really down to, I've done very, very well again without digressing too much, probably because the questions haven't created that. The coaching approach, or taking this, the beauty of learning to coach is that the benefits are inclusive. Your clients receive them and you do. So better outcomes for your clients, greater satisfaction in your work, renewed hope and optimism all round, improved personal wellness. And I'm only going to put this in there because this is not meant to be a go out and learn how to coach, but you can learn more by doing even the smallest training in a skill set. It's amazing how in our first one-day workshop, we used to actually have people saying, oh my God, this has changed the conversations I'm having. And I'm sure, or maybe not, but there could be some people putting in, but what about this? And what about that? What do you do with a client who wants this? Or, you know, how do I cope with that kind of question myself? And that's fair enough, and I'll probably have a decent answer for it. Or if you want to become credentialed as a coach and you want to work in a different way and start, it is definitely going to be an allied health profession. There is an association now, and we're in the early days, but there is a board certification, as you heard in the States. I will just say that whether you use this as an approach in your work or whether you choose to go out one day and be a coach, you will find that your satisfaction and your way of working and your potential for burnout decreases hugely. I've never yet gone into a coaching session, and there's been times when I've gone in and said, oh God, do I really want to hear all this stuff? Can I take this on today? I've never yet come out of it not feeling really somehow invigorated by it, because we go in with an attitude of curiosity and come out thinking, wow, how interesting people are. And if the session has gone well and the client has been involved in the conversation, which is really what this is all about, they will have set actions to take, and they will feel empowered, and they will feel committed, and the pressure is off you. Wouldn't that be a great gift, to not have to worry when you walk out of a session to think whether or not you help? Now, that may not be your biggest challenge. The challenges I read were often around multiple responsibilities and multiple roles. But taking that off our plate is something that is very life-affirming and really, really good for personal wellness. So on my last slide there, nothing changes unless something changes. If you're like me, you listen to a lot of webinars and you hear bits and you go, oh, that's an interesting point, and I'll make a note. And, you know, if I take one thing away to change, I feel like I've learned something. I don't write essays on it, and you're not going to act on everything I put forward, but I would like to think that you're picking one or two actions that you will take, if it's an experiment or a tiny step, or to sit down, actually pick something, see what spoke to you. Maybe perhaps something in the PERMA model jumped out. You might have realized, hey, you need to spend more time with positive people, or take up another activity, or spend more time in a hobby that you loved, or thinking about your purpose or meaning. You may find that writing a clear statement of what you want and moving through the other questions in the coaching model to find the best way forward is a good approach for you. But you're all individual, which is why me presenting a lot of answers to your questions would not have worked. But choose something and commit to it. You may be surprised at the difference it can make. So on that note, even 2 minutes ahead of time, I will stop and hand it over to you, Jenny, to see if there are questions. And please, there is no such thing as a dumb question. I'm really more than happy to hear from you. I know I can't see your faces. And my email is there. Please drop me a line if you want anything more explaining or a more personal chat with the question that you have. So thank you, everybody. Jenny, over to you.
Thanks, Fiona. We don't have any questions in the chat box at the moment.
Okay.
I have unmuted everybody. If anyone wanted to speak, you could just unmute your microphone and ask a question.
And I'll end my show so I can finally see a face.
Hi, I'm Julie. I've been a physiotherapist for a long time.
Hi, Julie.
Hi. One of the things, these are great, or these strategies are wonderful, but particularly as a sole practitioner, the phone rings. So the phone will start ringing from 7:30 in the morning. The phone rings when I have decided I'm going off to do this in my half-hour lunch break. The phone rings, etc., etc. I think something that might have been discussed that I missed, but is the point that the structure of our work means that we constantly put other people's needs first. We don't
Yeah,
say, oh, I can put that aside, they can wait. You know, I have a friend who's a plumber, they do that. And I wanted something a little closer to that, perhaps that you could guide us with.
yeah, sure. That's a really great question. And firstly, Julie, you are not alone. All of the things I talk about there, I struggle with myself. The only difference is that I found that having this kind of formula, and the first thing I'm going to do is, of course, ask you questions. What are you missing out on by answering the phone all the time? I'm using that, you know, lightly because that's what you mentioned. What are you missing out on, Julie? Do you mind? Do you mind engaging in this little chat?
I currently, since COVID, I don't have a secretary. So if
Okay.
I answer that phone, particularly those morning calls, they're just going to ring around and go somewhere else. So I'm directly often missing out on income. I will get orthopedic surgeons ringing me. I was sick in bed and I had an orthopedic surgeon with me. So some of those phone calls are very important. You know, the surgeons actually approach us nowadays to introduce themselves, for example.
Yeah, I totally get that. Totally get it.
What am I going to miss?
So,
that's part of it.
So think of the question the other way, because the question actually, forgive me for putting you on the spot, the question is, what are you missing out on by not answering the phone?
What am I missing out on by not answering the phone? Income.
Yeah. No, by not answering the phone.
By not answering.
Yeah. So in other words, I said, you know, what are you missing out on by answering it? So if you were to not answer the phone, what else would you be doing?
Oh, I'd be eating my lunch in peace. I'd be going to the shops, buying what I need to buy, whatever.
Okay. Did you see the nature of the question? Just for one moment, I'm saying just slip into the other side. I get what you're saying. We know what you'll be missing out if you didn't answer the phone. You're going to miss out on income. But if you keep answering the phone, and we're using this as a kind of like, you know, a metaphor in a way, if you were to answer if you kept answering the phone, you're going to miss out on things like, sounds like eating your lunch, doing essential shopping. What else was there, Julie? What else would you be doing?
Walking around the dam, for example.
Yeah. So going out walking, maybe exercise. So what do those things represent to you? What are they?
Stuff I have to do.
Are they balanced? I'm putting words in your mouth there, but would you say that's kind of more balanced? So you've got work, and then you've got this time. Imagine you waved, you know, we waved a wand, the miracle question, and somebody else is answering your phone. Yep. Someone else is answering your phone, and now you have this time. I'm trying to put you in that headspace in a very quick time to go, what would life be like if you could get to where you want to get to, which is to be able to block out time where you don't feel you are constantly plugged into the phone. And again, don't get me wrong, I understand what you're saying here, but the first step is to go, hang on, I'm doing all of this. What's my life becoming? And it's sounding to me like you're losing personal well-being. You're obviously, and I'd talk to you for longer about this because I want to get you in a place of, if not pain, of a place of imagining what it could be like if you could create a solution. Because does this make sense in terms of the last model I've talked about? If we can get people thinking about, what am I missing out on? What would my life be like if I could make a change? That's the first place to start. Because what you did, which is quite natural, is come up with the reasons why you couldn't. So you told me the obstacles, which I get. Don't get me wrong for a minute. This is not an easy fix. But to first to actually stop and go, okay, what could my life be like? Puts you in a place where you might be able to say, okay, is there a compromise? Is there some small change I can make that doesn't necessarily destroy my business? And that gives me a little bit more balance. Do you hear where I'm going with that, Julie?
A little incremental.
Yeah, it's like, I'll ask you now, I mean, just think outside the box, go, do you think, is there anything you can change that will just free up a little bit more time or a bit more sense of you have time to do something yourself, like eat your lunch?
I did that.
I know that we're not going to be able to kind of go, wait, all fixed, Julie's sorted. But it's just getting you just maybe.
I text them back, right? So they've rung me, and so instead of, you know, grabbing the phone, I see who it is, and I will text them back. And I can say, if this is for an appointment, this and this is available. So that's one strategy I have.
Okay, that's cool. And I like it. Have you tried it?
I want an appointment, and they're not too offended. It works. Yeah, so that's something that I have introduced.
Is it working?
Yeah,
is it helping?
Person
okay,
from the meetings, but then I thought I need to do all this preparatory work and coach her on what I want her to do. Too hard. So yes, that was another.
So it's interesting how even in this short conversation, and thank you for bringing this up, and I can hear the frustration in your voice, and I'm sure you are not alone with exactly that situation, is to try to see that if we can come up with a tiny change that you may not have tried yet. And I'm not going to make, as a coach, we don't make suggestions. You know, I'm not going to tell you, you're the only one who knows your life routine and your business. But you did mention one thing that might actually be working now. And if I wonder, maybe it hasn't become a definite habit yet, that you've tried it and then we went, oh no, we forgot about that. Because this is the other thing about behavior change. We need to actually go, right, this is in the diary, I'm going to do it. It needs to be really, the science of habits is incredibly detailed. So if that were to, now if we had longer, Julie, I would ask you more questions. I would bully you, if not into submission, bully you into thinking of any possible possibility, including, and forgive me, reducing your income. And I'm not saying that you can. But for somebody might actually go, well, actually, maybe it is more important to do these things than that. So there's this little tiny change that you get a little bit closer to getting what you want. And I'm always apologize for going, I can't come up with the magic one, but I think you will understand where I'm going with that, which is simply following this, work out what it is, work out what your priorities are, and then look at the tiniest possible change as an experiment. But first tap into what's important to you. Like really, and I think, Julie, what you were hinting at there, and you mentioned it for a lot of us, is that we put everybody else first. If I were to ask you, if you have a daughter or if you have a son or whatever, what lesson would you like to role model to them? I use this a lot, unashamedly, with women. You know, I always say no. We say, okay, if you have a daughter, what would you like them to learn from you? And every time they say, well, certainly not to put themselves last. So it's kind of a sneaky, powerful way of saying, you know, really, what are you putting out there? So by putting yourself last, what are you actually saying? And often we're just saying other people are more important. So we start with the thinking around it. Is that right? What are the long-term effects? Where could this go? I hope that's been helpful in a small way. But thank you for sharing. It is nice to have a question, particularly a curly one. So tiny change, again, I'm not here to provide the answers. I'm just here to try to demonstrate the model that we work with. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Julie, for speaking up and asking that question. We do have a couple of things in the chat box now. This is from Louise. I think the perfectionist thing is a big struggle for her, especially in report writing. Creates a lot of stress, trying to get uninterrupted time, increasing pressures to complete the admin task. I guess starting with the reflection of the process, environment, etc.
I love it. That's so good. Thank you. That's so good to hear, because that is the place to begin, isn't it? Perfection and getting the report right, doing it at the right time, doing it fully enough. Maybe just stop and go, okay, how am I doing that? Is it important to get exactly that much detail or whatever it happens to be that's making it be a problem? Can there be another way? As I said, personal organization comes up so many times. I'm not saying that you're not, but sometimes just tweaking it so that there's a time that you do that. There's certain set times in a day that we do things so it doesn't overlap and overwhelm us all the time. So thank you. I hope that reflection process helps, because perfectionism is a killer, because we can't be perfect. Thank you. Anything else, Jenny?
Yeah, there's a couple more. Elham has just said, amazing, amazing, amazing. Thank you, Fiona. Joe has a question. If you have a long list of actions in a plan, how do you decide what to start with?
Okay, here's a great one. I'll draw on somebody else's work. I love this. There's a guy called David Allen that wrote a book called, oh my God, what is it? Getting Things Done. It's called Getting Things Done. And he has a lovely model. He describes getting people in a workshop and saying, okay, write down every single responsibility you have in life. So, and express them as projects. So the project might be anything from writing 5 reports on blah, 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 or booking an overseas holiday for my family, or whatever it is, but in quite strong detail around what the project, what the outcome is of that project. And once you've got all these things written down in that way, not just a to-do list, you know, not just whatever, not little bits, not action steps, get the projects written down. And then he suggests you go back to those projects and you look at and you go, what is the next action that I need to take for each of those? If it's less than 2 minutes, you do it. So you're having a session on this, you're having a personal organization session with yourself. It's less than 2 minutes, see if I can remember the details, do it. If it's longer than that, either schedule it in or work out. So every project has just got one next action step. There's a lot more detail in it that I found it absolutely life-changing for me, because I was writing every project down and the 10 steps that had to be done for it. And it was overwhelming. Whereas when I start my week and I look at my projects and I go, what's the next action for each of these? I feel more in control. And every now and again, you review it. Once you've done your next action, often it's putting it back to somebody else then. You come back and say, is there something else? It's a bit like, I think it's along the same lines, but maybe not exactly. You know what that inbox is? Anyone else got a huge inbox? I pin things now. So I pin things that I'm either waiting for somebody else or I need to action. So they're in a little section on their own. And I find that's helpful. That's a different model. But is that useful in some way? So it's breaking it down. So it's not everything. It's a project and it's a next action.
Yeah, that was great. I was thinking of a big long list, so that's a really good idea. Yeah.
I remember him saying, he said, well, how did he describe? He said he had a workshop once and he had somebody in it writing all these things of everything they had to do. And they looked at it and they said, that is one amorphous blob of undoability. Until something like that, until she wrote them down as projects, not as this blah to-do list. Yeah. So thank you. Hopefully you're welcome.
I think Indu would like to ask a question. If you just want to unmute your microphone.
Thank you. Hi, Fiona. I'm Indu and I'm an allied health professional that works at a rural hospital, and myself and the other allied health, we're all sole practitioners. So we manage different caseloads, adults and kids, and everything in between. And so we're managing ourselves. But at the moment, our team morale is a little bit low because I think at different stages, we all feel different levels of burnout at the moment, mainly because we are able to action, like write an action plan and identify what are the barriers and think about tiny habits, like we like to go on walks every day together to improve our well-being. But what we find challenging is when we look at the barriers, we're finding that the barriers, sometimes when we report it to our managers, either they're not aware of how to help us, or it goes to the managers and they just want to report. And so we're finding it a little bit lost at the moment, where we want to receive more reach-in support from our other professionals that are working in bigger teams, but we feel sometimes we're just the forgotten people and we get forgotten, but our managers don't know how to recognize that. So do you have any strategies on how, as a sole practitioner and as a team of sole practitioners, how we can convey our issues to higher up to create that change, even though we're trying so hard on the below trying to create that change?
It's a very good question, and my head's swimming around all the different kind of models over the years that I've learned in terms of communication style, all the different things. Firstly, I would say well done for doing what I think is the most important thing, which is coming together. So instead of feeling isolated, that you are talking about the challenges that you're actually facing. Use that strength of the group. Really continue to use that strength of the group. The other thing that there's probably three things that come to mind. The next one is identify, when you look at the obstacles, look at the ones that are within your control to change. So there may be some things that you can do without approval from above. I don't know. But just say, is there anything here that's controllable that we can actually support each other to do? And it might be around the old thing of being able to say no. Okay, I don't know what your kind of boundaries are around that, but look for that. What's in our control? And then the third one, which is the biggest one, which I can hear how frustrating that must be. How do you get your message across to the people above? All I know is that often, and this is leadership coaching really, isn't it? It's working in management, is what people hear, what we say isn't necessarily what they hear. And there isn't one model, except there is one that we use even in interpersonal relationships, that follows a formula of, when this happens, this is the result. And it's usually around feelings. And I actually think it's okay to talk about feelings in a work environment. So when this happens, or when this situation occurs, we, the team, feel overwhelmed, or whatever it happens to be, and what we would like is. Now, that is no magic sentence, but it's a way of presenting or organizing your thoughts so that when someone reads that, they're not hearing blame, they're not hearing victimization, they're hearing very clear thoughts. And I don't know how you feel. I don't know how you fill those bits in, but is that helpful? I just know that sometimes the way we send our message, really difficult unless I was right in it with you. But does that help a little bit?
Yeah, I think that definitely helps, Fiona. I think our next step is probably wording those conversations with our managers. I think to avoid the blame or the conflict or those negative emotions or blame game and things like that. I think it's not about blame game. It's just more being heard and recognized and problem solving together with our managers. Also to feel valued, that we're not here to complain, but we have proactive solutions. But we would like the support of our managers to help us to enact those solutions. So I think that's the next step, just wording it correctly so it's not passive aggressive, it's just assertive, but more as a team building kind of approach. So that's, I think, what hopefully I'll speak to the rest of my allied health team, whether we could do that individually or people feel comfortable doing that by themselves, approaching the manager. But our managers are really lovely. It's just, I think our next step is just wording it correctly. So I notice that when I try to have these conversations with my manager, I get really emotional and start tearing up. So I think I need to just frame it in the way where I'm not letting emotion drive those conversations, but more being heard, but just articulating it in a more assertive way.
Fantastic realization. Isn't that funny? You actually have all the answers to this. And this is what we find, is you're so switched on and you're so self-aware.
That reassurance from yourself that yes, you're doing the right steps. It's just wording it a little bit differently so you can feel a bit more heard as a team. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. Thank you. A great question.
We just have one more. This is from John. Great session, Fiona, thank you. At Community Therapy, we have a large team of 100 health professionals working in a mobile capacity across the Central Coast and Hunter, and have lots of strategies to connect our team and keep them supported on the road. Do you have any particular tips for mobile health professionals and teams who work autonomously for most of their week?
Oh, right. Yeah, in terms of how they actually can connect without feeling isolated. I think, John, it sounds to me like you're kind of on it already, but I think that the very fact that you recognize that they don't have connection, it's really hard. There's so many different work models now to actually know what will work in what situation. So I probably need a little bit more, but my suggestion or my thoughts would be, whatever ways you can find of connecting those people, even if it's in a small way. It could be a chat group. This is where not social media, but any kind of chat group does provide support, where people are feeling connected with each other. Engaging, we talk about engaging with our students, our graduates, and we will do that often by a Facebook page. And sometimes we'll post a question, so people start answering and they just feel like they're talking to people. I think in this situation, it might be something that could be relevant or not, depending. You're going to probably tell me there's no phone reception next. Is that useful at all? It's whatever way you can get them connected with each other.
Thanks, Fiona.
You're welcome.
He said legendary, thank you, Fiona.
I'm so glad, John. I was worried for a moment.
We have actually run out of time. thank you everybody for asking questions. A lot of people get a bit shy on a webinar. Maybe we're all getting a bit more used to it. That's been really good. And Fiona, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. Don't forget to fill in the evaluation and you will get a certificate, and it will be up on our website, hopefully within about 24 hours. All right, thanks everyone. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jenny.